I'm Alex, and today, I share Claire's story, a tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and a choice that changed everything. What happens when the people you love see you as nothing more than a wallet? Stay with me, I'm about to reveal the story to you. In the quiet residential streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, morning mist draped over the manicured lawns like a delicate veil. Claire Reynolds stood by her bedroom window, her fingers curled around a steaming mug of coffee, watching as golden sunlight filtered through the towering oak trees. To anyone else, this town remained unchanged, an enclave of wealth, tradition, and old-world charm. But to Claire, the landscape had shifted irrevocably since her father's passing 3 years ago. Charles Reynolds had been more than a respected investment advisor, he had been the foundation upon which their family stood. He built a stable, secure life, ensuring that his wife, Diane, and their daughters never had to worry about money. He had believed in financial independence as the cornerstone of stability, a lesson Claire had absorbed deeply. But when he was gone, the structure he built crumbled, not from external forces, but from within. Diane refused to scale back their lifestyle. She still attended high-profile luncheons, maintained her designer wardrobe, and wrote generous checks to the First Presbyterian Church, all while claiming a modest life of faith. "We have to maintain appearances," she would say, as though that justified every expense. But in the end, it was Claire's bank account that maintained those appearances. Then there was Hannah, the golden child, the dreamer, the one who always expected doors to open without ever having to knock. She had pleaded to attend a prestigious design school in New York, her eyes shimmering with expectation. "I really want this, Claire. You understand, don't you?" And Claire, as always, had made it happen. She had liquidated her savings, writing the checks without hesitation, believing that supporting her sister's education was an investment in her future. At the time, Morgan & Whitman had offered her a lucrative transfer to an investment bank in Manhattan, one that came with a significant salary increase and a step closer to financial freedom. But she had turned it down, convinced that staying close to her family mattered more. Now, looking back, she wondered if that had been her first mistake. Hannah had graduated, secured a position at a high-end boutique in Soho, and promptly fallen into a pattern Claire had seen far too often, spending beyond her means, convinced that success was about image rather than substance. "I'll be more careful next month," she would promise after maxing out another credit card. But Claire had stopped believing those empty assurances. Her role had never changed. She was still the safety net, the quiet fixer, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the bank account never ran dry, even when it wasn't her own. The worst part? It wasn't just about money. It was about being seen. Her achievements, her sacrifices, her career, none of it ever seemed to matter. The conversations with her mother had become brief, perfunctory check-ins, often ending with some version of, "Oh, by the way, the church donations are increasing this year. You understand, don't you?" Claire had always understood. She had understood when she covered the tuition. She had understood when she paid off Hannah's overdraft fees. She had understood when she wrote the checks for her mother's country club dues. But what she didn't understand, what she could no longer ignore, was why her worth in this family was measured only by what she could give. She had always believed in family first. She had watched her father prioritize them above all else. And yet, standing there by the window, staring at the pristine streets of Greenwich, she couldn't help but wonder. If family was supposed to mean everything, why did it feel like she meant nothing at all? And what she didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly anticipate, was that the greatest betrayal was still ahead. The day Hannah announced her engagement, Claire knew, before a single word was spoken, that it would cost her. Sitting in their mother's sunlit parlor, she watched as Hannah's face glowed with excitement, her manicured fingers flashing the modest yet beautifully cut diamond. "He's incredible, Claire," she gushed, practically breathless. "Ethan's restaurant is already one of the most talked-about places in Greenwich. Critics love him, and you should see how packed it gets every night." Their mother, Diane, nodded approvingly, swirling her wine in a crystal glass. "It's rare to find a man like him in this town," she mused. "Ambitious. Talented. And, of course, he has excellent taste." Claire forced a smile, swallowing the familiar weight that settled in her chest. She wanted to be happy for her sister. She really did. But she also knew Hannah. She knew how easily she got swept up in grand ideas, in fairy tales built on borrowed dreams. And she knew, as she had always known, that somehow, this wedding would become her responsibility. Then came the words she had been expecting. "It's the most important day of my life," Hannah said, her voice tinged with the same urgency Claire had heard so many times before. "We're getting married at First Presbyterian, and the reception will be at the Hamilton. Everything has to be perfect." Claire glanced at the glossy wedding catalogue that Hannah had slid across the table. She didn't need to flip through the pages to know what it contained: imported flowers, couture gowns, private chefs flown in from New York, a spectacle designed for society pages rather than an intimate celebration of love. "We're still working out the final numbers," Diane said lightly, though her gaze was sharp, calculating. "But of course, we'll need your support." The word support hung in the air, deceptively gentle yet weighted with expectation. Claire exhaled slowly, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care. She had already drained her savings to pay for Hannah's education. She had watched her mother funnel money into church donations and luncheons, refusing to scale back their lifestyle despite reality pressing in. And now, they wanted this. She wanted to say no. She should have said no. But logic had never been the defining force in this family, duty had. And duty had always fallen on her shoulders. "I'll help," she heard herself say, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. The next morning, she logged into her brokerage account, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she stared at the numbers on the screen. $50,000. The last of her father's memorial stocks. Her father had spent a lifetime building this wealth, ensuring that no matter what happened, his family would be secure. And now, that final piece of security was about to be funneled into a single, fleeting day, one that, deep down, Claire feared would be remembered more for its excess than for the love it was meant to celebrate. Still, she clicked sell. As the funds transferred, she told herself this was the right thing to do. That her father would have wanted Hannah to have the best possible start in her new life. That family came first. She even let herself believe that, once the wedding was over, things would return to normal. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that this decision would mark the beginning of a divide that could never be mended. As the wedding preparations gained momentum, Claire found herself slipping further into the background of her own family. Calls from her mother, once frequent and filled with casual conversation, had dwindled into short, transactional exchanges about wedding vendors and final deposits. Hannah, who had once shared every detail of her life, now spoke to her only when a check needed to clear. At first, Claire told herself this was normal. Weddings were stressful. Brides got overwhelmed. But the uneasy feeling at the pit of her stomach, the one she had ignored so many times before, grew heavier with each passing day. Still, she convinced herself that once the wedding was over, things would return to normal. She was wrong. The night before the ceremony, Claire stopped by their mother's house, hoping to share a quiet moment with Hannah before the big day. But as she stepped inside, she realized she wasn't part of this world anymore. Hannah stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by a circle of bridesmaids, laughing and sipping champagne as the final adjustments were made to her dress. The room was filled with warmth and excitement, but the moment Claire entered, it shifted. "You made it," Hannah said, her tone polite but distant. Claire forced a smile. "I just wanted to check in before tomorrow. See if you needed anything." One of the bridesmaids, a woman Claire barely recognized, smirked. "I think Hannah's got it covered. With all the help she's been getting." A quiet chuckle rippled through the group. Claire felt the weight of their amusement settle in her chest. She had paid for the dress Hannah was wearing. The flowers. The venue. Every luxury that made this night feel so effortless. And yet, she was a stranger here. Hannah glanced away, her fingers toying with the lace of her gown. She didn't deny it. Of course, Claire said smoothly, masking the sting. Just wanted to make sure. I'll see you both at the church. She left without another word. But as she walked to her car, the uneasy feeling she had ignored for months crystallized into something undeniable. She didn't belong here anymore. The morning of the wedding, Claire woke before dawn, her mind already clouded with the tension of the day ahead. At Morgan & Whitman, an important investment meeting had been scheduled, one that required her full attention. She had explained this to Hannah the day before, assured her that she would be there in time for the ceremony. But as the meeting stretched longer than expected, her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket. She didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. By the time she stepped out of the conference room at 12:30 p.m., a sinking realization settled in her gut. The church was across town. Traffic on a Friday afternoon was brutal. No matter how fast she moved, she would be late. She had made a choice. And she knew Hannah would never forgive her for it. When Claire finally arrived at the Hyatt Regency, the reception hall was already being cleaned. The once elegant tables were now littered with half-empty champagne glasses, wrinkled napkins, and the remnants of a celebration that had moved on without her. She spotted her mother first, standing near the bar, swirling an expensive wine in her glass as she laughed with a group of guests. Hannah, radiant in her Vera Wang gown, was deep in conversation with her new husband, Ethan. Claire took a deep breath and stepped forward. The second Hannah saw her, she stopped mid-sentence. Slowly, she turned. Finally showed up, she said, her voice light, but her words sharp. We already cleared away your place setting. Claire froze. I had a meeting, she said, her voice measured. An important one. I told you I might. Her mother tilted her wine glass, expression unreadable. On such an important day. A ripple of soft laughter spread among the guests nearby. Claire's fingers curled at her sides. She had spent $50,000 making this day possible. She had put her own financial security on the line. And yet, standing there in her perfectly tailored navy suit, she felt like nothing more than an afterthought. Her gaze drifted downward. At her feet, a place card lay discarded, stepped on and forgotten. Claire Reynolds. A bitter taste filled her mouth. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. And it had been made long before she ever stepped into that reception hall. Without another word, she turned and walked away. By the time she reached her car, her phone buzzed again. Hannah's name flashed across the screen. Claire stared at it for a long moment. Then, she pressed decline. She started the engine and drove into the fading light. She didn't cry. Not yet. But for the first time, she understood the truth. She had sacrificed everything for a family that never truly saw her. The morning after the wedding, Claire sat at her kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Her phone lay face up on the counter, screen illuminated with 52 missed calls. Most were from Hannah. Some were from their mother. A few were from unknown numbers, likely relatives who had attended the wedding and had their own opinions on her absence. None of the messages were apologies. Instead, they were accusations. How could you embarrass your sister like that? You ruined the most important day of her life. You have always been selfish. Claire scrolled through the messages, her expression unreadable. She had expected anger. She had expected blame. But seeing it spelled out so plainly, without even a hint of acknowledgement for everything she had done, sent a chill through her. One message from her mother stood out. People at church are talking about us. That was it. No concern for Claire, no effort to understand her side. Just an obsession with appearances. She let out a slow breath and set the phone down. Something inside her snapped into place, a quiet but final shift. She had spent years giving, her time, her money, her patience, under the illusion that one day, they would see her for more than what she could provide. The wedding had been the final proof that they never would. Claire closed the message thread, opened her laptop, and pulled up her financial records. She printed out 3 months of bank statements, the $50,000 wire transfer to Hannah's wedding fund, and the transaction record from the sale of her father's memorial stocks. Then, she opened the website of Harrison & Partners law firm, one of the most respected firms in Greenwich, one that had worked with her father for years. She dialed the number. A warm, familiar voice answered. Claire Reynolds. It has been a long time. Too long, she said, her tone even. I need to set up a consultation. There was a pause. This is about your family, isn't it? Claire closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, her resolve sharpening. Yes. Harrison explained that a certified demand letter would be the first step. It was professional, legally sound, and left room for negotiation before taking further action. A business approach, not an emotional reaction. Claire nodded, absorbing every word. This was not just about getting her money back. It was about setting a precedent. That afternoon, as she reviewed the draft of the demand letter, she felt something she had not felt in years. 3 days after sending the demand letter, Claire was at her desk when the intercom buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Her mother. Hannah. Ethan. They stood in the dimly lit hallway outside her apartment, their faces tense, guarded. Claire exhaled slowly, set down her pen, and pressed the button to unlock the door. As they stepped inside, she saw the shift immediately. Diane, always polished, still wore her signature designer suit, but something was different. The effortless confidence she once carried was subdued. Hannah, usually radiant and self-assured, sat stiffly, her hands clenched together. Ethan, the man who had been introduced to her with so much promise, looked exhausted. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Diane broke the silence. Why are you doing this? Her voice was quiet, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. You know what people are saying about us at church. Do you know what this is doing to our reputation? Claire leaned back in her chair, unfazed. I think we both know this is not about church. Hannah let out a breath, shaking her head. We are family, Claire. Why would you turn this into a legal matter? Claire studied them. The irony in their words was almost laughable. They had not cared about family when they laughed at her at the wedding reception. They had not cared about family when they drained her finances and treated her sacrifices like obligations. She reached for the neatly stacked documents on her desk and slid them across the table. These are the records of every dollar I spent on your wedding, she said evenly. The sale of Dad's memorial stocks. The venue payment. The designer dress. And then there is this. She handed them another document, a notarized repayment plan, drafted with the assistance of Harrison & Partners. Hannah skimmed the page, her lips parting slightly. $500 a month. 14% interest. Claire met her gaze. That is far lower than what you would get from a consumer loan. This is fair. Hannah's face twisted in frustration. Fair. Claire, the restaurant is not even stable yet. We are barely covering rent. Ethan, who had been silent up until this moment, finally spoke. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of resignation to it. I will take responsibility for the payments, he said. We will make it work. Claire turned to him, nodding slightly. Good. Then show results first. Then we will talk about adjusting terms. Diane let out a deep sigh, rubbing her temple. A notarized document, she murmured. As if we are strangers. Claire tilted her head slightly. If we were strangers, I would not have given you such favorable terms. Silence filled the space. The weight of her words hung between them, undeniable. Hannah's fingers clenched around the paper. "You are serious about this?" Claire's expression did not waver. "Yes." The three of them sat in silence for several moments, the reality settling in. Then, without another word, Hannah reached for the pen. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed. The notary's voice was calm, methodical as they finalized the paperwork. "This contract is now legally binding." Claire collected the documents, sliding them into her folder. "Do not forget the repayment dates," she said, her tone professional. Hannah did not respond. She simply stared at the paper in front of her, the full weight of her new reality pressing down on her. Diane stood, pressing her lips into a thin line. "Is this the end of our relationship?" Claire's gaze flickered toward the window, where the city lights stretched into the horizon. "No," she said softly. "This is the beginning of a new one." No one argued. 3 years had passed since Claire had sat at her kitchen table, staring at the demand letter she had sent to her family. 3 years since she had drawn a boundary no one thought she would enforce. 3 years since she had finally chosen herself. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of her high-rise office at Morgan and Whitman, she gazed down at the streets of Greenwich. Once, she had felt tethered to this town, bound by obligations she never questioned. Now, she moved through life on her own terms. Her decision to establish financial boundaries had not come without consequences. Hannah's extravagant wedding had faded into memory, but the weight of its reckless spending lingered in the form of monthly repayments, $500 deposited into Claire's account like clockwork. She no longer felt resentment when she saw the transfer notification. She simply recorded it, updated the balance, and moved on. It was not personal. It was business. Not long after the wedding, Ethan's restaurant collapsed under the pressure of high overhead costs and dwindling customers. The hype had not lasted, and within a year, the doors had closed. The reality of their financial missteps came crashing down, forcing Hannah to abandon her designer lifestyle. The once meticulously curated social media posts showcasing luxury bags and exclusive events had been replaced with quiet, unremarkable updates. One afternoon, Claire ran into Hannah at a local grocery store. "Claire," Hannah said, shifting the shopping basket in her arms. Claire glanced down, noticing the generic brands replacing the high-end labels Hannah once flaunted. "You bought another new bag?" Hannah asked, nodding toward the structured leather tote on Claire's arm. But her voice lacked its usual arrogance. There was no trace of mocking superiority, only quiet resignation. Claire simply smiled. "I did." Hannah nodded, looking away. There was no further judgment, no passive-aggressive remark. For the first time, Claire saw not a spoiled younger sister, but a woman who had finally begun to understand reality. Underscore 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 underscore. Diane, too, had changed. The extravagant church donations had quietly stopped. The high-profile luncheons and social events had grown fewer. Without Claire's silent financial backing, Diane was forced to adjust her lifestyle. She had also begun calling Claire, not to ask for money, but simply to talk. "Claire, I saw the flowers blooming at the park today. It reminded me of your father. Just wanted to hear your voice. There is a new cafe near your office. Maybe we could try it sometime." For years, Claire had fought to be seen beyond her financial contributions. And while their relationship would never be effortless, it was no longer a constant transaction. Underscore 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 underscore. But life had not just been about setting boundaries. It had also been about opening new doors. Her work at Morgan & Whitman had flourished. The same keen judgment that had once gone unnoticed within her own family had earned her the respect of Wall Street's elite. Last year, she had been named one of the 40 most influential women analysts in a prestigious financial magazine. The recognition had once felt hollow, another measure of external success that could never quite replace the personal validation she had once sought. But over time, she had come to appreciate it for what it was, proof of her own worth, built not on pleasing others, but on trusting herself. She had also discovered something unexpected: mentorship. When an opportunity arose to volunteer for the Young Women's Leadership Program, Claire hesitated at first. She had never considered herself a mentor. But as she sat across from young women starting their careers, sharing what she had learned, not just about investments, but about self-worth, boundaries, and the cost of putting others before yourself, she realized how far she had come. She had become the woman she once needed herself to be. Underscore 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 underscore. And then there was David. They had met in the least dramatic of ways, over a corporate strategy meeting that had dragged on far too long. At first, he was just a colleague, then a tennis partner on weekends. But somewhere along the way, he became more. He understood complicated families, the weight of unspoken expectations. He knew what it meant to rebuild from nothing, to choose yourself even when it felt like a betrayal. There had been no grand declarations, no whirlwind romance. Just steady companionship, a choice to show up for each other, to be there in the quiet moments. Underscore 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 underscore. That afternoon, Claire placed a bouquet of white lilies on her father's grave, the soft petals catching the spring breeze. "I think you would be proud, Dad." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a quiet sense of peace. She was no longer the woman she had been 3 years ago. She had once believed that love meant sacrifice, that family meant giving until there was nothing left. But she had learned something far more valuable. Love without respect is obligation. And family without boundaries is control. Her father had once told her that time heals all wounds. She was not sure if that was entirely true. But she knew this: time had made her stronger. And in the end, that was more than enough. Claire's story is a powerful lesson on self-worth, boundaries, and respect. Too often, we equate love with sacrifice, believing that family obligations should outweigh our own well-being. But true love is not about endless giving, it is about mutual respect. By choosing herself, Claire proves that setting boundaries is not selfish, but necessary. In a world where family expectations can be overwhelming, her journey reminds us that we are not defined by what we provide, but by how we are valued. Real love is not measured by sacrifice, but by respect.